So I think that, again, there are ways around it, it's not impossible, but as much, I think it's our responsibility when artists are very clear about these things that we really do.
Just your responsibility and
Exactly.
limit also.
Yes.
It has to be feasible.
This just, Marie, just for a second, this brings me to a discussion you and I were having along with Rick and Eddie at lunch, and that is about documentation. This is a very old problem. And as there have been, you name the work of art, whether it's paintings or ceramics and whatever period, but conservators have always run up against the practical problem that there were 70 works in the exhibition and there was really only enough time or only a budget to conserve 30 of them. And so, what do you do with the one piece or the 5 pieces that are going to go in the exhibition, but that you don't have the funds or the time to do a compensation in area of loss or a crack or damage or what have you, to sort of visually restore the characteristics of that work. And so what you do is that you document the fact that you couldn't do that in this case. You didn't do the fill and you didn't do the replication, and that you're putting it out on exhibit with visible damage and visible deterioration because there isn't the budget or the machine or whatever the practical parameters are. And we sort of documented that. And it seems to me that this is one of those cases where you've got tangible parts of the work of art that you simply cannot replicate because of practical constraints. And you sort of document that, but then you actually go ahead and exhibit the work. You loan the work. It helps make the scholastic point that the exhibit wants to try and give to people.
That's what the chocolate sculpture does. It documents it, films it,
Yeah,
just the audience. Then
I see it as an old
presents
problem.
that documentation.
I would really be open to hearing that it's not an old problem, that it's a new problem, and there are reasons why.
But it also gives rise to a lesson, which is anybody acquiring any media work, have that conversation up front. And when the artist says it must be presented in X technologies, always and forever, that should be a red flag to anyone collecting and say, well, we'll do that, and I'll guarantee that we're going to preserve it for 15 years.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't
That's it.
think, we wouldn't put a time limitation, but we would require knowing the risk that there will be
Yeah.
time.
There's also a company in Europe called Idletech.
Oh, yeah, you're working with
You don't
them.
need a particular model, but if you need like a regular Sony PVM, you can rent them. So PVMs are also, I think, somewhat still available on eBay. And you might consider the stockpile as one of your sort of strategies. And then I thought it was interesting to see artists mention like Peg and Alan Rath, because I think Alan Rath is very aware of that topic. And so with him, it might be about just discussing this variation with the artist himself.
He is very open.
Yeah. And so that's sort of the luck we have with working with living artists, is that we can actually collaborate with them on this variation.
And I think that that's our main, every time we acquire, even when we did, like, those conversations did not necessarily happen when those works first came to production, because it was a point where we weren't thinking too far into the future about these things. And we went back and reconnected with as many artists as possible and had them complete questionnaires. And I know MoMA has artists complete like a 36-page questionnaire that asks, what they're trying to do is not necessarily have artists come into standards, but ask questions from multiple perspectives so that we are gathering as much information as possible so that then we are going back and building a scenario for that particular installation, that piece, and how that's going to live. And it's very dynamic. It's different for every single piece.
Yeah, it seems dynamic. We had a discussion with Henry Moore in the late 70s, and you were talking about the sort of corrosion and patina on his bronzes. And he said, well, I really enjoy the sort of the organic interaction of the work with the environment. So, whatever contributions the bird makes and so on, this is really interesting to me. I like to see the work as it sort of lives and changes and so on. And then we sort of pointed out in a subsequent discussion about 8 years later, that really one of the biggest things that was changing the appearance of this work was acid rain. And that this was in fact etching a different pattern into the bronzes and really creating this etch pattern in these lines that were creating their own sort of rhythm and pattern and surface rather than, and sort of changing his sculpted surface. And he was like, well, crap, no, I don't want that to happen. happen. So can you stop that, you know? And so his understanding and his desires actually changed over time as an artist. It was like, yeah, it's okay, and then at some point, we mean it's interfering with like the lines I put and the surfaces and textures and modulation I put in the sculpture. Yeah, no, I don't want that, you know? It was really kind of interesting. I think this thing will also happen
Yeah.
with electronic and